It's been several weeks and I still haven't received my 650 Rand refund. First it was waiting for a business transfer. Then it became I'm cash strapped. And that's when I realized that I was no longer comfortable with how the situation was being handled. Let me rewind and explain how I got there. As you might know, I had my rental housing tribunal hearing last week. And although I initially sought pro bono legal assistance, I ultimately proceeded on my own. But that decision didn't come lightly. When in a video a couple weeks ago I asked for help, many responses came from corporate lawyers. Some were clearly people seeking paid work. A few appeared decent, and one in particular I chose to engage. But looking back, I now see that that was a mistake. In our very first interaction, when I asked the simple question, are you trustworthy and reliable? The response I received was anger. For me, that moment was a clear signal. That's also when I should have parted ways after that first conversation. But I had faith, I had hope, and I had trust. So, in this video, I'm sharing my experience to explain what I do not want in a lawyer and what you should look out for when engaging lawyers, particularly over social media. So before we begin, just a disclaimer, this video is my personal review of my experience. Everything I'm sharing is based on my direct interactions, as well as payments, messages, and records. This is not an allegation of criminal conduct or wrongdoing. It's my personal consumer review focused on process, communication, and professionalism. And I'm also sharing this because it taught me something very, very important. How to identify a lawyer relationship that I do not want, and why trust is absolutely non-negotiable in these types of interactions. So let's begin. A couple of weeks ago, I made a video where I put out a call for pro bono or low-cost legal assistance during a very stressful period of trying to get back my unlawfully withheld deposit from a past landlord. Then an individual reached out to me both via DM and via email. In my first conversation with this representative, he said things like, "You remind me of myself when I was younger." He spoke about understanding how I grew up. He said he wanted to help me. And at the time, I interpreted that as goodwill and good intentions. However, what followed after the next 3 weeks felt inconsistent and unclear to me, particularly around payments, documentation, and next steps. That's not the type of uncertainty or unclear space that I want to be in with a lawyer. So after that interaction, the first thing this individual told me was that a sheriff fee is required to serve documents. This was before we knew that the matter is moving to rental housing tribunal hearing. And at that point, we were still in a space where we were exploring small court. I requested an invoice from this individual, and what instead they sent me was a screenshot of banking details. So in the timeline of my experience, number one is that the invoice was actually a screenshot. I was told that an invoice had been sent for the sheriff fee. Instead, what I received was a screenshot of bank details. Then when I said, hey, this is not an invoice, and when I asked for an invoice, the tone of the response changed and the entire exchange became very tense. This person then acknowledged that what was actually sent was a screenshot, not an invoice. Bro, I can see the difference between a screenshot and an invoice. So for me, what I took from this is I do not want to work with a lawyer who presents a screenshot of bank details as an invoice and gets extremely angry and frustrated when I say, hey, this screenshot of bank details is not an invoice, may you please send an invoice instead. I do not want to work with that type of lawyer. Next, in the timeline of my experience working with this individual, the second aspect was that the payment was requested into a personal bank account. So firstly, okay, I received the bank details from the business and I was told to make payment into this account. When I attempted to pay the sheriff fee into the business account, I received an error message on my bank. This account is unable to receive payments. Okay. I was then given personal bank account details to make the payment. I'm not drawing conclusions here, I'm just stating what happened. From that experience, what I took was that for me, I do not want to work with a lawyer who cannot provide clear, formal invoices for the payments they request. Next, number 3 in the timeline of my experience, this guy referred to a receipt as a post-paid invoice. Now he's telling me after I pay, I'm going to receive a post-paid invoice for my payment. I didn't. While I do have written acknowledgement of the payment received, not an invoice was shared, nor a post-paid invoice/receipt was shared with me. As a client, if your lawyer is using that type of terminology, it's both confusing and unclear to me. And it furthermore contributed to my concern about how these records and payments were being handled. For me, I do not want to work with a lawyer whose financial documentation is unclear, non-existent, inconsistent, or confusing. Then number 4 in the timeline of my experience is this person's reaction when I inquired about trust. In our second conversation, after the payment issue and the invoice confusion, I asked directly, "Are you trustworthy and reliable?" Instead of answering clearly, the response included anger. Then he said, "Do you want to work with somebody else?" Followed by, "I can tell you anything." Now, let me just say this clearly. You don't want to hear this from the lawyer that you're working with. You don't want your lawyer to tell you, "I can tell you anything." Mm-mm. No. You want somebody that's transparent. You want somebody that's honest. You want somebody that's straightforward, consistent, has integrity, and so on. You never want to hear that line, "I can tell you anything." Then what followed over the next 3 weeks was exactly in line with that, "I can tell you anything." What I continue to hear from this person felt both inconsistent and unclear. For me, I do not want to work with a lawyer who reacts with anger when I ask reasonable questions about trust and reliability. Then number 5 in the timeline of my experience, the sheriff fee was requested, but the papers couldn't be served. Remember, I was asked to pay 650 Rand for a sheriff fee to serve papers. I was told that the urgency of the matter is in my hands and that immediate payment would accelerate results. His response, "I want to get you your money back before Christmas." And he also spoke about court closing dates, etc. Then after payment, which failed with the business bank account but was successful with the personal bank account, few days later, when I asked whether the papers had been served, I was told, "I can't send papers without your signature." Sorry, you didn't say that before. You didn't say that before. He gave the impression that the process did not need my interaction. So now I'm surprised. Okay, you couldn't send the papers, but you didn't tell me, but you waited for me to check in on you before delivering these news. That requirement had not been raised before the payment was requested. So for me, the lesson and what I take from that is I do not want to work with a lawyer who asks for payment before fully explaining all the requirements and the conditions. Next, number 6 in my timeline of experience is incorrect legal guidance, then reversal. At one point in our discussions, I was told that a specific act was not admissible as evidence. Then later, when I referenced the legislation that does allow it, the response changed to, "Yes, that's true." Really? Okay. I did not receive an explanation for the earlier guidance. So from that, I learned that for me, I do not want to work with a lawyer who gives legal guidance, then quietly reverses it without explanation and gives the impression, "Yes, that was evident the entire time." No, we can't be doing that. Because now comes in inconsistency. Number 7 in the timeline of my experience. The evidence pack that I sent this person appeared to not have been reviewed by them. Now, you sending documentation and evidence to your lawyer, and your lawyer is not reviewing that. What type of relationship is that? See, after our second call and I'd shared the sheriff fee and so on, I was asked to send any additional evidence that I had, including communications, a lease, and so on. So I sent all of that via email. Despite this, I was later asked, did the landlord send you an email refusing payment? Bro, all the emails are in there. That information was already addressed in those documents. I was told somebody else was working on it, which led me to question whether those materials had actually been reviewed. For me, I do not want to work with a lawyer who appears unfamiliar with documents I have already carefully prepared and sent. Next, number 8 in the timeline of my experience, I received a screenshot of a 200,000 Rand invoice. So remember upfront, I asked him, are you trustworthy and reliable? This person got angry. Then he sent me a screenshot of an invoice with a prior client. It was valued at over 200,000 Rand. The invoice was numbered 001 and it was dated September 2025. You're telling me that in the 5 years of your business being registered, you got your first client in September of 5 years later. Okay. That invoice did not relate to my matter and it did not resolve my concerns. Furthermore, I did not challenge its authenticity or call the individual to validate whether this was a real invoice. But what I took from that experience for me was that I don't want to work with a lawyer who responds to concerns with unrelated documents instead of directly addressing the issue. Next, number 9 in the timeline of my experience, there was a court date that was set and then silence afterwards. So I was told verbally that there was a court date scheduled. I don't know what was the purpose of this court date. I don't know what was meant to be presented at this court date, but I was told that a court date was scheduled. The date was never confirmed in writing, never followed up, and never mentioned again. So another lesson for me, I do not want to work with a lawyer who mentions court dates without clear written confirmation or follow through. Then number 10 in the timeline of my experience, awaiting rental housing tribunal response, then no update. Remember, I was told that I could not receive these papers to sign. The papers could not be sent. Now he's telling me that all of this is because he's awaiting a response from the rental housing tribunal. At the end of that day, I did receive confirmation from the rental housing tribunal that a hearing date had been set. But he did not further clarify on what exactly were the actions that led to that or what was going to happen from that point onwards. Another thing I've learned, this person did not share updates proactively. They required for me to check in. And what I learned from that is, for me, I do not want to work with a lawyer who goes silent after saying they are waiting on an institution or next step. Then number 11 in the timeline of my experience, remember at this point now, the matter is not moving via small court, it's moving via rental housing tribunal. Hearing the sheriff fee is no longer required, so I now request a refund of that sheriff fee. First, I get pushback. Why do you want a refund? We're going to need that later. Tell me, sir, how do you anticipate we're going to need that later? We haven't even engaged in the hearing process yet. And then afterwards, when I clarified that we are not proceeding via small court, this money was for sheriff fee is no longer necessary. If we need it in the future, I can pay it back. May you please refund me? I get an agreement that yes, you will be refunded. Okay. Now I'm waiting for this refund for approximately 3 weeks. At this point, it's now 6 weeks. So in that time when I was in contact with him, I was told that the 650 Rand would be refunded. Then as time continued to go, he was explaining these delays, and the explanations that I was receiving was Yeah, payment was made into a personal account, and I'm now waiting for my business account to send money into my personal account so that I can pay you. And that transfer is taking longer than expected. It's a different bank to a different bank, so it takes a couple of days. Okay. The next explanation, I'm cash strapped and I have to take money from the business to repay you. At that point, I recognize that I am so completely uncomfortable with the territory in which this relationship is, where I can be told excuses and excuses and excuses from a lawyer. This is not what I want in my life. I want to be able to trust. But this person, what I'm hearing, I don't want this. At that point, I indicated that I was parting ways and I'm going to escalate this matter to the Legal Practice Council, who's meant to be dealing with legal practitioners, especially in this type of manner of the mishandling of funds. So, from that experience of this delay of the refund and me getting excuse after excuse, what I've learned is that I don't want to work with a lawyer who struggles to refund such a relatively small amount of client money within a reasonable time. Then, number 12 in the timeline of my experience with this individual, searching the Legal Practice Council database for this individual's details. What I did as I was starting to become uncomfortable was search the Legal Practice Council database for this individual's details, and I could not find the individual listed. I raised this as a concern to the Legal Practice Council in my complaint. I'm not really taking this as a legal conclusion. I'm just at this point only describing what I've observed when I searched that database. I don't want to work with a legal practitioner that's not on there. So the lesson I'm taking from this is, like, for me, I don't want to work with a lawyer whose professional registration I cannot independently verify on the LPC database. Then, number 13 in the timeline of my interaction with this individual, the status of company. According to CIPC records at the time, it appeared to be in an ARD registration process, having been registered in 2020. Again, just a factual observation. What I learned from that, for me, I do not want to work with a lawyer whose business status and records are unclear or inconsistent. So, as you can tell by these 13 aspects of the timeline of my experience, that I did not really feel very good throughout this entire interaction. Like, I'm looking for somebody that I can trust, that I can rely on, that is consistent, that's showing integrity. Based on my experience, I felt like I was walking on eggshells. I felt like I could not bring to this person's attention feedback about what's not working, or they would get extremely angry and then they would threaten to back out and say all of these things to me, as if this relationship is one where I'm not a client, but more so this person's brother's friend or this person's uncle's friend who like, you are 1 foot in and 1 foot out. I got that type of sense. And for me, I never want to work with a lawyer like that. I always want, if I'm working with a lawyer, to be able to trust this person, to be able to rely on this person. And this person takes their work seriously and also takes me seriously. So throughout this entire process, I did not feel like I was able to trust this relationship. For me, a lawyer must be ethical, reliable, transparent, honest, and consistent. When trust is missing, the relationship absolutely will not work, especially in vulnerable situations. But throughout all this, there's a deeper lesson here. And this lesson, this experience taught me something very important. It's not necessarily ideal to be told that you remind me of myself. Because when professionalism is replaced with familiarity, now the boundaries become blurred. And when professionalism breaks down, it often shows up in how people treat others. I did not throughout that entire time feel like I was spoken to as a client. I felt like I was spoken to like a friend you don't care about. That's not a legal conclusion. That's just a relational observation and a lesson for the viewer. So, in a good lawyer relationship, throughout all of the bullshit that I faced, this is what I've realized that I'm really looking for in a good lawyer relationship. For me, a good lawyer maintains professional boundaries. Like, bro, don't tell me you in the supermarket and the hospital and the station and the court. I don't need your location updates. I just need updates that are related to me as a client. Second, a good lawyer answers questions calmly, does not subject you to emotional volatility, guilt, and shame when you ask direct and clear questions that you're entitled to ask from a lawyer. Number three, a good lawyer provides clear documentation, not inconsistent communication, not unclear documentation, true documentation, clear documentation. Maybe this is a welcome letter, maybe this is an invoice with details related to your matter, and so on. Maybe this is follow up communications, and so on. These are the types of things you want to see from a good lawyer. Number four, a good lawyer communicates consistently. A good lawyer does not wait for you to check in. A good lawyer proactively provides updates. And furthermore, with consistency, a good lawyer doesn't say something upfront, change their story later, and then change it again and suggest that you didn't know the full story upfront when this person was entrusted to share with you the full picture. Number five, a good lawyer keeps personal matters separate. Like, I don't need to hear about where you are all the time because this person was giving me location updates like I am their romantic partner or family member. And you know what the thing is, that these location updates were always an excuse of why I will not get the refund. Yeah, I'm sitting here until 9 o'clock. Okay, I'm there. And now, even on the day when this person told me that they were off, they're going to process the refund, I waited the entire day and didn't receive anything. That tells me that I was not receiving information that was trustworthy. Number six, from a good lawyer. A good lawyer handles your money transparently. A good lawyer recognizes client funds are not meant to be used for business expenses or even personal expenses. What the fuck? If your lawyer is inconsistent with what payments are happening where and where the money is and where the money is going, that's a red flag. You better stay away there. And number seven, in the presence of a good lawyer, you don't feel uneasy. A good lawyer makes you feel safe, makes you feel seen, makes you feel heard. And you can tell both by the way you feel and by what you're hearing and seeing that this is somebody that you feel you can trust and rely on. If in your heart you're getting uneasy feelings, you feel like you're walking on eggshells, you are feeling anxious on the inside, you are feeling like you are doing more of the work in this relationship, that's not a good lawyer relationship. So just watch out for that. So if confusion and anxiety show up early, just pay attention to that because that can be a clear signal to you to proceed in a different direction. It's also the signal, as you've seen, I ignored up front in my first conversation with this person when they got angry when I asked them if they're trustworthy and reliable. I should have taken that as a red flag to move on. Instead, as somebody that sought pro bono assistance or low cost legal assistance, I took it as I don't necessarily have many options. I have to take this. Let me tell you, you don't have to take this. The better option would be to you to do it on your own. Because if you on your own is calm and clear versus you working on somebody and the anxiety and the confusion is not related to the legal matter, it's related to your relationship with them, that relationship is not advisable to proceed with. You got to move on from that person and better do it. Face the stress, the pressure, and the anxiety and the preparation all on your own. Do it on your own until you can find somebody that you feel calm and can rely on. That's a better way to proceed. So, in conclusion, this entire review is about sharing my experience and the lessons that it taught me. And I hope you don't fall into a similar situation that I did. This entire experience clarified for me that trust, transparency, and professionalism are non negotiable in a lawyer client relationship. Absolutely non negotiable. This experience also showed me exactly what I will not accept again. And hopefully it can help someone else avoid a similar experience. So share this video with somebody that's dealing with a rental housing tribunal matter, perhaps going into a hearing, facing a dispute with a landlord, or even seeking pro bono assistance or low cost legal assistance. Share this video with them. There are great many lessons that can help you make better decisions than I did. And if you're seeking help during a vulnerable time, just know that trust is everything. And in my experience, the early red flags, they did matter. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know in the comments, have you experienced something similar? You have a similar experience than I did. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Take care. Bye, everyone.